And as my mama woke up, lone slot got stone, Fanny broke up, I can still remember when I was only 3, watching pops play figure, that was what I wanna be, and I still go digging in that crate when I need to, records like a record of all the shit I've been through, needles leave marks like scars of the past on the arms of my mom when she held me and we danced to the music.
Just keep reminiscing a bit. This one's about a basketball court in Avondale that we all used to play at. Basketball court tells my life without no more talk. Footprints still in the floor for when my force walk. Memories still in my thoughts, so back and forth form. Chalk still drawn on the wall for the scoreboard and in the breeze. I hear the old wind kicking leaves as I sit in trees, watching little me sit in threes. Smell the tar still burning in the summer sun, and mountain bubblegum mixed with burning rubber from my bike's back tire, leaving marks on the park. Car park palms had my name carved in it bark. Blood stains remain like my first tattoo, written in the concrete with a piece of bamboo. And I go back now and again to get up out of my head and think about it of the hours I spent, and I can hear the ball bouncing again, and sometimes I can even hear the sound of the net. Rolling through the street with nothing on our feet, just snotty little kids playing 5-on-5, chilling in the park, just drinking in the dark with a bottle on the bench on a Friday night, chilling with myself, just me and no one else, while we looking at the world from a 3-point line, from 3 feet tall all the way to 24. It's possible cool, and it's my life. The days flew, the same hoop was where we came to. Same crew, same old suedes, but they were spray blue. Same view, nothing to change, just the chains new. The tape play break loose for us to break to. Same room we light the court every night like a torch, while the old folk call their kids in from by the porch. You can tell the ones who grew up here, they used the gear the older brothers used to wear like a souvenir. It's like we knew it new. I'm looking at my new recruit sitting on the same hoop where we used to shoot. Now we sit up on the park bench, skipping math, sipping jag where we sat in the days picking scabs. In the pitch black as I reminisce on every swish, missing every shot I ever missed. And I remember still, ain't forgot I probably never will. The day I bet will, 7-0. For real. Yeah. We were walking in the street with nothing on our feet, just snotty little kids playing 5-on-5, chilling in the dark, just drinking in the park with a bottle on the bench on a Friday night, sitting by myself, me and no one else, looking at the world from the 3-point line, 3 feet tall, all the way to 24, responsible course, so it knows my life. See, I went home today, and the court where we go to play been bulldozed away. Now the only stain from the olden day are the marks on the pathfinder, roller blades and the fingerprints left on the backboard, blackboard and the flatboard. That's all. No more lights, no more fights for who's like Mike, and no games that go all night. There's no more. I pick up a rock and take a jump shot that I once got from that one spot, and I remember how it felt being young as I count 3, 2, 1. I guess one day we all gotta end the game. Never would've made the NBA anyway, but I'll never let my memory fade. And whenever we play, I remember the day just walking through the street with nothing on our feet. Snotty ass kids playing 5-on-5, chilling in the dark with a bottle on the bench and the bums in the park on a Friday night, sitting by myself, me and no one else, just looking at the world from the free point now. 3 feet tall, all the way to 24. Responsible for it, knows my life.
Man was sick, old shit.
So we sing a song by ourselves. We're gonna do some depressing, slit the wrists music now. Do some coke and have a bath, maybe. No reference to it. Nowadays I sleep standing up, I don't dream no more. Forgot how long I've been broke for. Just normal now. This is always how I always felt. Ain't even thought about what it was like before the drought. What's it all about? Fuck it, I don't know. Giving up on that, had enough of that. Trippy, hippie, lovey-dovey crap. Ain't no God, ain't no bar. Just work at the same old job until you fuck your back. Sick of the fucking act, dream about being rich. Living luxury, suck my realist, dictating shit that we live in. You can see the system, representatives to the crucifixion of the working class people who never get a break. Working 14-hour shifts for 11:38 with no rise. Stuck in coal mines for their whole lives, working overtime till they sold ours. How many dreams does it take to screw a life up? How many beans can I take in one nightclub? Cause one won't do, 2 ain't enough. I fucked around and got used to this stuff. The more I know, the more I grow. The more I score, the more I owe. The more I'm all alone, morning on the morning after. After I spin on my dough, snow and snow. Now I understand why they call it blow. Watching time running by while I'm running high. Mama flying up all night high, trying to numb my mind. Sun comes up, I come down and come alive. It's when I'm wondering how much money can money buy. See the bloody eye fry when my buddy died. We hung when we hung, I cried for the 100th time. I'm a pussy, I ain't gonna lie. I ain't gonna lie, I don't wanna die, I don't wanna die. What's it all about? You fucking right. Just wanna be national. Funny guy.
that space.
mothers and all the fatherless troublesome broken buzzers, bomb off them. For the hustlers scabbing off of the government, wandering in the street, playing cricket with the rubbish bin. For the lonely nerd rolling herb on his broken turntable that he makes his beats on and no one's heard. For the bony birds spinning spoken word, blowing though I'm phony fur, rocking headphones that only work at one side. For that unsigned drunk guy who'll never let the funk die, working like he's done by. For the Sheila with the blunt eye and too much pride to let the son see his mom cry. Real. For the has-beens that had dreams, the fuck-ups and crack fiends, the dropouts and drag queens. For the lost kid pick, the first picked on, the one they laugh at, the opposite from a sitcom. For the fat kid, misfit brat kid, lipstick black chick that no one ever sat with. Dirt broke brat kid that really never had shit. Rat bag scabby and noodles out the packet. It's dedicated to the skater kids, chucking rocks. Taggers cutting logs, stoners huffing offs. Fuck the cops and the rugby jocks. Fuck my boss and the goody-goody prefect sucking cocks. For the fellas that I set up in attention with, and anyone that's ever had the name on the attendance list. This for anyone that's ever thought of ending it, and every piss poor bum living on the benefit.
This one goes out to you. This one goes out to you. Goes out to you. This one goes out to you. Goes out to you. This one goes out. Goes out to you.
This for the open arms of prisoners holding bars, watching life rolling past faster than stolen cars. Fiends trying to find a fix for their broken hearts, rolling grass while they watch the hands of time choke their chance. For stoners lost that we shared over Nas, full blast on my arse, sitting in my bro's garage, going halves on the cars, making moments lost. Wishing we could hold the past frozen like golden stars. For the days gone, the days made fun, the cardboard we break down with blue Puma suede on. For the boombox that Tupac played on, the same one I chewed up my Snoop Dogg tape on. This is a 94 when I had the highest score on a new Street Fighter with a double fireball. For the change that I spent on a giant jawbreaker and the pocket money that I used to buy the sauce. For the rap fanatics, illmatic addicts, racking stacks of classic wax and baggy jackets. Backpackers on the train tracks, tagging backwards from the back of mathematics to the back of paddy wagons. This is when I rap the plastic or fantastic, and when I first heard fat lip on that cap. That magic I felt when I sat in my bomb, then I moved suddenly and it's the Cadillac. For back then, the backseat dirt I did, permanent scars I left on hearts and birds I hit. For the bridge burning with the first herb I lived, for the worst hurt I turned to the best verse I spit. For the world turning as we all turn the ship, predetermined overturning to it, no alternative. Getting high, killing time like murderers. This is life, peace to the cellmates I serve with. It's dedicated to God forgive me, we just heard that shit. I didn't know it off by heart. This wouldn't happen on Good Morning. And this is the next track instantly after the last one. Yeah. We stole this beat from Dilla. Check. About a radio that I used to have when I was a kid. Something like that. Check. Yeah. And I was sitting in the room, I could still hear the bass line boom as my dad's head spun with the 45 tune. Crashed out on the couch with the needle in his hand as it scratched on the record. That's the weed up in the can. And songs in the key and lights spinning as the water bursts. Morning birds singing, dad's gigging, got a quarter nurse to pick us up. She got the Beatles in the tape deck. Hard days, night and I ain't even seen a day yet. I just wanna hold your hand, mama. We can put the funkadelic on and just jam, mama. I'll be singing little feet as I kick mine on your stomach. Put your head on the pillow and miles on the trumpet. Don't worry, I'll be out soon. Soon as Pop gets here, we can all celebrate. You can get the biscuit and we'll get high to the earth when the fire rain. We'll be a family just like slagging in. Cause that's just what I do. Like ever since I was a kid, I would play my music on my radio because that's all that I know. Like ever since I was a kid, I used to play my music. And I was sitting in my room.
No mai haere mai, and welcome to the final Orcon IRL of the year. I'm Russell Brown. Oh, hang on.
Hey, I'm Jogai Bhatt.
You're not supposed to be here. No.
Hey, I can stand. It's fine.
No, you're here.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Slight stage management
terrible.
hiccup. Should we try that again? That was all on a live stream as well. Oh well. No mai haere mai, and welcome to the final Orcon IRL of the year. I'm Russell Brown.
And I'm Jogai Bhatt.
And you're who you're supposed to be, which is quite a relief.
I had to read it off the paper.
So Jogai Bhatt, senior youth correspondent, how are the kids?
Did really well. How were the senior correspondents? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It gets harder and harder to read the scripts without my reading glasses. Did anyone else get that? 18 point, I find, actually does the job. If the light's okay, 18 points all right. Today we'll be contemplating 2017, the weirdest year since 2016, and looking ahead at what's to come. Thank you as ever to the Golden Dawn, 95 BFM and Orcon for the support that makes this possible. The idea today is short and sharp, so we can fit in as many voices as possible. And with that in mind, let's welcome our first two guests, our European correspondents. Tze Ming Mok performed the neat trick of leaving New Zealand in the twilight of the last Labour-led government and arriving back just in time to vote for the next one. And Matthew Dentith on the end here has been studying strange ideas on the other edge of Europe at the University of Bucharest. Kia ora koroa.
Welcome.
Salut. Tze Ming, all my London friends seem to post absolutely desolate things on Facebook. Obviously London didn't want to go with Brexit. It's happening. It seems ghastly. Is it actually as bad as it seems from this far away?
Yes. Well, the thing is, you asked me earlier about what's the mood of London. Well, the thing with British people is that they're very repressed. So if you walk around London and something comes up in the news and you say, oh, have you seen this? And the standard response literally is, I don't want to think about it. It's too depressing. If you're an actual European, and there's plenty of those in London, they're freaking out because for the first time in their lives they're experiencing racism and they don't know how to handle it. I feel bad for them. If you're a non-white person and you grow up in the West, it's something that you get used to throughout your whole life. But if you're swanning around, you're Swedish or something in London, living your whole life, you've got your kids, and suddenly, I have to either leave or I have to go through a huge process of applying for random visas that all the real immigrants had to go through.
That's what the world's like.
They can't handle it.
Is this everyone being mean to me suddenly? That's what they like, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's very, very stressful for them. So London is a combination of super stressed out and really depressed about Brexit.
Because you actually had the day after the Brexit vote, or in the days after, you literally didn't leave the house for a couple of days.
Yeah, I was quite depressed about it. I didn't leave the house for like a couple of weeks because there were hate crimes happening all around my neighbourhood, which is, one of the most cosmopolitan, multicultural neighbourhoods in London. And it was really unpleasant. Basically, after every kind of incident like Brexit or any kind of terrorist attack, there's always a backlash, or there's always like a resurgence of hate crimes, which is probably why, you should measure them. And the UK does measure it, but only through NGOs. and New Zealand doesn't seem to measure them at all. So
No, we don't have a thing
that might be an
called... We
idea.
do not have a thing called a hate crime in New Zealand. It's
No.
not, doesn't formally exist. It has been pointed out to me by more than one person that what's happening with Britain at the moment with respect to Brexit is actually worse than Trump, because Trump can only be there for a maximum of 8 years. It might be by the end of next year, who knows, but this is permanent for you guys.
Yeah, and people are tying themselves in knots trying to think of potential ways that it could be stopped. Technically, it's possible, but realistically, really, really unlikely. Yeah, I'm really pissed because I spent like 10 years working my way up to British citizenship, and it cost me like loads of money. And I finally got to the across the finish line. I'm getting like one crappy country, and instead of 28 countries, and I'm like really bummed. Really bummed. There goes like our fantasy of retiring on a houseboat in Amsterdam, and my kid getting like free university education in Denmark, and oh fuck.
That would have been nice, the furniture and all. Matthew, you have been at the other edge of Europe, in Romania. How are things there? Do they want to be European?
Yes, the Romanians really do want to be part of the EU, in part because Romania has a very long history of very corrupt government, and so they see the EU as an external stabilising factor. So, for example, the leader of PSD, the Social Democratic Party in Romania, Livia Dragnea, who can't be an MP because of electoral fraud convictions, is currently under investigation by the EU for financial embezzlement of EU funds. And so Romanians are going, look, if we don't have the EU as an external factor here to moderate what our government does, things are going to be a lot worse. So the reaction by Romanians to Brexit was, what have they done? Have they worked out what they're about to lose?
And on the other hand, we've seen in Poland in recent weeks a march of 60,000 Nazis in Warsaw. Is there anything of the kind in Romania?
Not of that particular kind. I mean, the kind of racism you find in Romania tends to be towards its other indigenous people, the Romani or the Gypsy, who have a long history of being segregated and oppressed by the Romanian state. So there's no explicit marches about foreigners at this particular point in time. The Romanian racism is very much focused on the part of their society they just don't want to admit to.
You've been studying conspiracy theories at the University of Bucharest. Is academic freedom adequate in Romania?
Yes, as far as I was aware, although of course as a Westerner operating in Romania, I had a lot more freedom to say what I wanted to. It's not quite so clear that if I'd been a Romanian academic trying to keep a tenured position, I would have been allowed to go on national TV in Romania and talk an awful lot about the dangers of Russia to the Eastern Bloc at this particular point in time. But no, at this stage, academic freedom is in existence in Romania. That being said, the current Romanian government is looking at taking over research institutes and appointing governors, so they do want to take control of what academics are doing, but there's sufficient pushback at the moment. They're not being successful, but as they say, give them time.
And Tze Ming, what's the state of academic freedom in Britain? Because there was quite recently a call for a purge on pro-Remain academics, wasn't there?
Well, that was more, it wasn't so much an academic freedom issue as a government contracting issue, whereby the government didn't want pro-Remain and specifically European academics to be advising them on, things like Brexit and the costs to the UK of Brexit. So that was just straight up racism, really. But it's not really about academic freedom. It's just about how fucking retarded... Sorry, that was a really, really bad thing to say. How
there is no BSA on the internet.
Sorry,
all
I've
right,
had like
cool.
that much beer, and I'm just going back to like my 1992 brain. But the government has no idea what it's doing. All it can handle at the moment is kind of bad faith posturing. So that's one of the bad faith postures that it's adopted. And yeah, there's a lot of academics who are from the EU. I'm not really sure what their futures are going to be. There probably will be like an exodus, essentially, to some degree, of European academics, and an exodus of European funding, an exodus of European students, and basically a slow decline, or maybe a rapid decline of the UK academic sector.
This
It's
sounds
not looking
depressing.
good. It's pretty depressing, yeah. And that's not even getting onto the NHS, man. 1 in 5 doctors are leaving the NHS because of Brexit.
Wow. Jogai, you got anything
I'm
there?
just having an out-of-body experience listening to this. It's very depressing.
But I'm really happy to be home.
Is Jeremy Corbyn still the answer, and will he be the answer in 4 years' time?
Well, you know, the thing with Jeremy Corbyn is that, you know, like many ideologues, he's like a great campaigner, but not very good at managing. So it's possible that he could lead the Labour Party to victory, but he'll be, you know, the only reason the Labour Party is not in the news anymore or for tearing itself apart is because the Conservatives are tearing themselves apart. The Labour Party's finished tearing itself apart. He's not very good at working with people, but maybe he'll learn. I'm hoping that he will, because...
he's young yet.
He's young, he's got his whole life ahead of him. You know, what they really underestimated was the ground game, the strength of the ground game that emerged around the Corbynista movement. And if there's anything that comes out of the just miserable state of the UK at the moment, there's a lot of talk about like the youth quake and whatever. It's not so much that, the young people are rising up and throwing off the shackles of neoliberalism and so forth. It's just that enough of them have been activated to get into the ground game and do campaigning in ways that is clever and that actually gets the right numbers of people to the polls. And that's what's made a difference in terms of the electoral landscape. And also the disintegration of the Conservative Party. And I think the Labour Party here learnt a fair bit from watching that election as well, in terms of, again, the Sintamania and the youth quake was kind of like a bit over-egged here, but there certainly was enough people that joined the campaigning movement for it to make a difference where it helps.
I get the impression it happened here, but not as much as everyone thought it was.
No, there was like a youth blip, but yeah, things like, Momentum, which is essentially, it's a campaigning organisation, and they use social media very well. It's not really about like, look how many people watch this video, but about directing people to the actual polling booth, actually transporting them to the polling booth, registering them to vote, and then taking them to vote. That's, I think, is where it has made a certain difference.
Right, but like you said, despite the whole thing of the youth quake, even a week before the elections, it was something like 250,000 young people were still yet to enrol between the age bracket of 18 to 25 or something, so...
Yeah, it's kind of overplayed.
Matthew, as I noted before, you are a conspiracy theory specialist. This must be a particularly rich time for your field.
Yes, I mean, in the age of Trump, conspiracy theories have become such a recurrent and popular part of contemporary political discourse that it's quite hard to cope with as an academic, because as someone who's writing on conspiracy theories, the lead time between writing an article or a book and going to publication is anywhere between 3 months to a year and a half. And on some level, what we're seeing with the Trump regime, it's quite fast, the things which are coming out. But the lead time between my writing about something and it being published means that anything I want to say about Trump now could be entirely outdated by the time I see print. And so it's kind of both a boon and a detriment. What was interesting to me living in Romania for a year was just how big the George Soros conspiracy theories are. And that George Soros isn't a major figure in conspiracy theories here in Aotearoa, but in Eastern Europe, George Soros is the figure behind everything. Romanians think that he's a secret Hungarian plant designed to bring down the current government, except when they want money from George Soros, at which point he is the boon to their society. Bulgarians think that George Soros is a Romanian plant trying to destroy the Bulgarian government. The Hungarians think he's both Romanian and Hungarian, trying to destroy... It's just all over the place. So, yeah, conspiracy theories have become really, really big. I got into this field at just the right time.
Well, I suppose, it's an advantage that you have. You do a podcast, you're on Twitter. Is that the reality of being an academic specialist in this field, is that you can't wait that long for you can't wait for publication?
No, you need to be up to date with all of these things, because you need to be aware of what the evidential biases are, the way that people are constructing explanations from the available evidence, the kind of theories which are popular at one particular time. One of the big things about spending time in Eastern Europe is the realization that what we take to be conspiracy theories here are often official theories elsewhere. I found this when I was in the Baltic states a few years ago. For people in Latvia, conspiracies are just a normal part of everyday politicking, and the idea that we would dismissively call something a conspiracy theory and ignore it ignores the reality of their lived experience. So, yeah, this is one of those points in time where you need to be active, you need to be online, and you need to be aware of everything which is going on. The problem is, there's too much going on, and I don't have enough time in the day to be able to keep up with the conspiracy theories I know about, let alone find the new ones which are appearing at a huge rate of knots.
Indeed. Yeah, it's frightening. Now it's time to actually go from across the world to across the road and introduce our next guest, the one who was here before.
Yes, please welcome our community advocate and ACE local networker, Tina Plunkett.
Yeah.
Let's all clap.
Do you want to bring a chair stool for yourself? And I guess you'll have to go just down the end there, here. Tina, one thing that's impressed me about your local knowledge is that you tend to know not just what political types are thinking, but what businesses are thinking. And we've seen a degree of discontent and unhappiness, particularly in West Lynn, about things that we normally think are great, i.e. cycle lanes. Is that... how do we deal with that? Because there is going to be a difficult period of change, isn't there?
I think there is. Thank you for starting me off lightly. I think there needs to be, both sides need to stop and look at the whole of all the projects that are happening. We all know there's some long-term projects happening throughout the whole of central Auckland. We've got Cutting a Happy Road happening as well. We know logically that Ponsonby's going to have some cycleways. Hope that's not breaking news to anyone. And obviously the Westland shops have happened. A lot of people would agree that the design has been a little bit over-designed in the Westland shops, but the change needed to happen at the same time. But there seems to be this kind of dump on everyone on one side and then dump back on the other. So I think people need to stop.
Do you think people are going to calm down once the work is done and they can see how it does work?
Absolutely.
But how long is that going to be?
Being a parent around central Auckland, being someone that uses public transport and a cyclist with my child, Westland shops have never worked. They've been dangerous. The crossing's been dangerous. Cars with priority. It's a massive wide road, etc., etc. They've changed something that in the first stage looks rather dramatic, but there'll be softenings, and I believe that the cycleway has to be delineated and cars will stop parking in the cycleway, and I think it's a positive change.
But the rich hippies need their car parks. They need their angle parks outside Harvest.
The one that I love is apparently they need their car parks right outside the bar. That does my head in. You don't need a car park outside the bar. You can walk. I think someone's worked out there's you have to walk an extra 12 metres to Harvest at the furthest point of the car parks.
This is an outrage.
Outrage. We're so sorry.
I think the first time I ever talked to you about these kinds of issues was around K Road, and at that point everyone was terrified about K Road gentrifying.
It did.
How's the gentrification going?
I think it's safe to say K Road did gentrify, and it's people like me that moved in the 90s. We can't blame the people that are moving in now for gentrifying, but there's places around the world that actually use artists to move into areas to lift areas as a practical solution, because then they become exciting and interesting. K Road obviously is trying to hold on to that part, and I think they will, but they have to have that relationship with the people that are moving in. I've heard some great little stories of some of the new neighbours moving in and wanting to problem solve the prostitutes that are outside their buildings, and cheekily being told, "Oh, so glad you came to talk to us about that. Yeah, we should build them a shelter and have them somewhere safe they can live, live and work." So, yeah, I think things like that will happen along Colonial Happy Road.
Yeah. Can the resident freak community do anything to help its own case as well?
I think sit at the table. I think that's something we've always talked about. I'm a firm believer that I don't think you have to be elected onto something to sit at the table. We have boards all around Auckland, especially at the moment in the past 5 years, that have been sitting and planning our city quietly. And it's amazing, the people that have time to sit around the table and talk and say what they want for the future of the city tend to be a lot older than me. I have sat on one particular project where I was the youngest person, I think by about 20 years, and I'm in my 40s. They're literally planning our city. And a lot of this is volunteer. So if you want to have your say, you have to sit at the table. And they will gladly welcome you, because most of the people that do have time are retired. And I'm not being ageist here. I think past generations have done wonderful things for our city, but it's time for them to sit back, empty some seats and give it to the 20 and 30-year-olds, and actually encourage people to sit there. And you get free food sometimes. It's good.
Yeah, because you are on the board of you are literally by about 30 years the youngest person on the board of the Grafton Cemetery Preservation Committee or whatever.
Oh no, so I just did that as the project, but I have removed. I'm no longer working on that. But that was a phenomenal project to work on. A green space in the city is the Simon Street Cemetery. It's compartmentalised due to motorways and traffic, but you can geek out about that stuff massively. You can find out about cycleways that are going to happen, what's happening with the motorway there, and you get to have your say about the cultural relevance and the religious relevance for a future of the city. That cemetery is highly Christian, obviously. And you can have some fun because we've got a really diverse multicultural city happening in the future, and we need to recognise that people are dying and we need to create spaces for them.
Do you think a group like Gen Zero is vital to the structure of our society?
I love Gen Zero. I think they're
Me
cool.
too.
That was really exciting for me because I wasn't engaged with them, but I saw this group kind of open up and start, and it kind of gave permission for younger people to have heaps of voices. Whereas sometimes a little while ago, I definitely felt like, oh, Tina's complaining about something about roads again, So getting that kind of really practical young voice, and it really isn't so young. I don't know why we keep calling them young. 20s and 30s isn't that young for planning.
Younger.
Yeah, it is, but it's younger. It's younger, yeah. I think that's really important. And I think there's actually been a change. If you think about what happened 5 years ago and what's actually happening now, you are seeing a lot of younger people sitting, enrolling, getting voted in, even in Parliament.
Chloe.
Exciting.
Our travellers, have you noticed in the time you've been away? I mean, you've both been, it was about a year since you were last in Auckland, Tze Ming, and you've been away a year. Have you noticed the changes?
I've seen a lot more homeless people on the streets. There were a lot of homeless people on the street in Romania, but seeing an almost equivalent number here, that's been pretty chilling.
Not much good yum cha anymore left in Auckland.
Oh, no. No, what you're saying is you know where the good yum cha is, but you're not telling us.
No, the old Hong Kong families, their kids are all doctors now. They don't want to make yum cha.
We're going to have all of these guys back on the panel later on, and I one thing I forgot to mention is that there is a bucket there at which you can write down questions for the panel. And do that. And feel free to make them humorous. We quite like that.
But again, like questions, not a TED talk. Like.
No, well, that's one reason we get you to write them down is so you don't do a fucking TED talk. But is there one question for any of the panellists before we move on? All right. Future of Europe. You too.
I'd just like to pay tribute to the post-war consensus and its passing this year. 66 years. It was a good run for, those two basic principles of Nazis are bad and human rights are universal. Big round of applause for the post-war consensus. Yeah. Dead and gone, but not forgotten by some old people like me.
So I think for people in Eastern Europe, the future's looking relatively bright, although that being said, there are places like Croatia and Hungary, which have major Nazi party influences in their government. The future of Europe overall, I guess we have to see what that divorce bill is going to look like and what the consequences are for the EU. How are they going to cope, but also...
How are they going to cope with Britain leaving?
Well, how are they going to cope with the celebrations of when they can get rid of those really angsty, annoying Brits who've been interfering with European politics for such a long time?
True. Yeah, maybe that's just going to make Europe way more efficient.
Possibly.
And happier. We're going to take a break now, and we'll be back in a few minutes with our next two guests, Chris Fowlie and Harkanwal Singh. And so you can go to the bar. That's why we have the breaks, because it helps Matthew. Always help Matthew. He's a nice man. He runs a good bar. Cheers. See you soon.
Had my pants in the back, that's when I got my first tape. Then my pops got me doggy style on my birthday. I was just a puppy, trying to chase the cat. Never knew about death, just a while playing back head. This DJ getting eaten by my tape deck. Dr. Green thumbing, I ain't even been blazed yet. Bass head like my pops used to play me Parliament. I was playing Drake, he showed me how he sampled it. Studying the art of it, rounds in my bedroom. Scrapped up my homework, worked on my excuse. Ran from the booty with the far side, playing in my little hard racer bass line vibrating in my headphones. Everything will be alright once I get home and put a record on, cause that's just what I do. Like ever since I was a kid, I would play my music on my radio because that's all that I know. Like ever since I was a kid, I would play my music. To the B-side, one song, 27 years long. My youth's gone, but I still got Snoop on. New Orleans records that play like a hidden message. Take me back to the essence of my childhood lessons. And I never brothers, I fly on the yellow moon. And I can hear my mom crying. For said it was the drums bang, screaming louder than a punk band. Sunglasses on with no sundown. One more drink still playing as my mama woke up. Lone slide got stone, Fanny broke up. I can still remember when I was only 3 watching pops play figure. That was what I wanna be, and I still go digging in that crate when I need to. Records like a record of all the shit I've been through. Needles leave marks like scars of the past on the arms of my mom when she held me and we danced to the music. tells my life without no more talk. Footprints still in the floor for when my force walk. Memories still in my thoughts, so back and forth form. Chalk still drawn on the wall for the scoreboard and in the breeze. I hear the old wind kicking leaves as I sit in trees, watching little me sit and freeze. Smell the tar still burning in the summer sun. And melted bubblegum mixed with burning rubber from my bike's back tire, leaving marks on the park palms. Had my name carved in it bark. Blood stains remain like my first tattoo, written in the concrete with a piece of bamboo. And I go back now and again to get up out of my head and think about it of the hours I spent. And I can hear the ball bouncing again. And sometimes I can even hear the sound of the net. Walking through the street with nothing on our feet, just snotty little kids playing 5-on-5. Chilling in the park, just drinking in the dark with a bottle on the bench on a Friday night. Chilling with myself, just me and no one else, while we looking at the world from the 3-point line. From 3 feet tall all the way to 24, responsible call, lose my life. As the days flew, the same hoop was where we came to. Same crew, same old suedes, but they were spray blue. Same view, nothing to change, just the chains new. The tape play break loose for us to break to. Same room would light the court every night like a torch, while the old folk call their kids in from by the porch. You can tell the ones who grew up here, they used the gear the older brothers used to wear like a souvenir. It's like we do a loop. I'm looking at my new recruits sitting on the same hoop where we used to shoot. Now we sit up on the park bench, skipping math, sipping jag where we sat in the days picking scabs. In the pitch black as I reminisce on every swish, missing every shot I ever missed. And I remember still, ain't forgot it, probably never will. The day I bet real, 7-0. For real. With nothing on our feet, just snotty little kids playing 5-on-5. Chilling in the dark, just drinking in the park with a bottle on the bench on a Friday night. Sitting by myself, me and no one else, looking at the world from the 3-point line. 3 feet tall, all the way to 24. Responsible course, and it knows my life. I went home today, and the court where we go to play been bulldozed away. Now the only stain from the olden day are the marks on the pathfinder, rollerblades and the fingerprints left on the backboard, blackboard and the flatboard. That's all. No more lights, no more fights for who's like Mike, and no games that go all night. There's no more. Pick up a rock and take a jump shot that I once got from that one spot. And I remember how it felt being young as I count 3, 2, 1. I guess one day we all gotta end the game. Never would've made the NBA anyway, but I never let my memory fade. And whenever we play, I remember the day just walking through the street with nothing on our feet. Some snotty ass kids playing 5-on-5, chilling in the dark with a bottle on the bench and the bums in the park on a Friday night. Sitting by myself, me and no one else, just looking at the world from the 3-point line. 3 feet tall, all the way to 24. Responsible for it, knows my life. Some singer-songwriter songs. We're gonna do some depressing, slit your wrists music now. You know what? Nowadays I sleep standing up, I don't dream no more. Forgot how long I've been broke for. It's just normal now. This is always how I always felt. Ain't even thought about what it was like before the drought. What's it all about? Fuck it, I don't know. Giving up on that, had enough of that. Trippy, hippie, lovey crap. Ain't no God, ain't no God. Just work at the same old job until you fuck your back. So cut the fucking act, dreaming about being rich. Lady luck, you can suck my realism. Dictatorship that we live in. You can sue the system, I'll be selling tickets to the crucifixion of the working class people who never get a break. Working 14-hour shifts for 11:38 with no rise. Stuck in coal mines for their whole lives, working overtime till their soul dies. How many dreams does it take to screw a life up? How many beans can I take in one nightclub? Cause one won't do, two ain't enough. I fucked around and got used to the stuff. The more I know, the more I don't. The more I score, the more I owe. The more I'm all alone, morning on the morning after I spend all my dough, snorting snow. Now I understand why they call it blow. Watching time running by while I'm running high. Mama find up all night high, trying to numb my mind. Sun comes up, I come down and come alive. Spend I'm wondering how much funny can money buy. Sitting bloody eye fried when my buddy died. We hung when we hung, I cried for the 100th time. I'm a pussy, I ain't gonna lie. I ain't gonna lie, I don't wanna die, I don't wanna die. Bust it on the out, fuck right. Just wanna do national, funny guy.
Kia ora, we're back. And I've been given instructions on mic technique. I was speaking over the top because I'm a broadcast professional, not a singer. And apparently this is a singer's microphone. Yes. Anyway, one of the new government's first 100 days promises is action on medical cannabis. What does that really mean? I'm not sure they know. And what to make of the promises of a referendum on cannabis law reform. There's one guy I always ask about this stuff because he's a pot geek and he knows. It's Chris Fowlie, the president of Norml New Zealand. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Russell.
So we have not law reform promised, but a referendum. How do you feel about that?
Well, on the one hand, we're very positive because we think we will comfortably win any referendum. But I think we've got concerns over what exactly the question's going to be, whether it's going to be binding and how long it's going to take. If we're looking at the 2020 election and then a law change after that, which might take 2 years, 3 years, then you're talking at current arrest rates, we're going to have 50,000 people arrested at about $1.5 billion cost in that time. So, yeah, we're kind of concerned about the time frame.
But I guess there are some advantages to a referendum in that it forces, it makes sure the conversation has to be had.
Exactly, yep. And it gives us 3 years to have a really good conversation. But again, it comes back to being binding. If we want people to get inspired by this referendum, if we want them to turn up and vote for it, it's got to be something progressive. I don't think people are really going to be, if it's something like fines or something really insipid. At the moment, all we have to go on is it's a referendum about legalising personal use, is what we've heard in the media. We don't really know much more about that. But is it limited to use? If you're legally allowed to use it, then are you allowed to grow it, or are you allowed to share it? Are you allowed to buy it? So these are the sorts of questions we need to have. But yeah, we've got 3 years to have it.
It strikes me, I mean, you, as Norml, have been advocating a long time. This seems like a very important few years for you.
Exactly. I think we're in a new phase, so everything that we've done up till now, there's a lot of people celebrating, right? There's a lot of people thinking that we're going to have legalisation tomorrow, people thinking that it's already happened as part of the coalition agreement. Yeah, there's a bit of getting ahead of ourselves there.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a big couple of years for Norml.
Yeah. So. What we've done in the past in terms of our activism and our organising, I think that's in the past, and we're in a new phase now, and we've got to really reach out to a whole lot of other organisations and really broad sections of the community, and work to a common plan so that we're not at cross purposes, and we're going to have to look at some decent funding as well to really do it properly.
Where's that going to come from?
Well, that is the interesting question. Overseas, when you look at places like America, when they have binding referenda, so then people can actually make a kind of investment decision and go, well, okay, if I fund this, it will happen, and not just be years and years of talking about it, then you do find kind of wealthy individuals step up and for the good of it go, yes, let's fund that. If it's not binding, that might be a lot more difficult. You also might find that some of the people in Australia, there are some really big businesses that have been created in their medical cannabis industry over there, which is very industry focused. They actually have fewer medical cannabis patients approved in Australia than we do in New Zealand, even though we hear that it's been legalised over there, but actually it's like only about 100 patients that have got it. But you have these multi-million-dollar businesses that can't bring products to market because they've gone down this pharmaceutical route. So it's possible that some of those companies, which, as I say, are now very wealthy or very kind of well-resourced, might view if they can help reform in New Zealand and actually help them in Australia too.
What do you make of Labor's first 100 days promise on medical cannabis? Because I'm not sure I understand what they've promised.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone does actually. Again, we don't really know what's going on there. We're trying to find out. We're coming up with our kind of our bottom line that we can present to them and try and work with them on that. But again, this kind of deadline they've created for themselves with the 100 days, it is really good to have action. And it's one of our things that we want, is we want these changes to have immediate effect, not just be kind of creating a product development pathway that takes 5 or 10 years like a pharmaceutical, but we need something immediate. So it's good to have it in that 100 days, but our worry is that they don't really know what they actually want yet, and they may, this is the risk, get captured by the bureaucrats who may recommend just some minor kind of tinkering, a bit like what we saw with cannabidiol, the CBD, that again was reported all around the world as New Zealand has legalised medical cannabis, and that happened in September, and not a single prescription for cannabidiol has been granted.
Why not?
Well, they'd still keep it a controlled drug for a start, so it's actually, they've just carved out this little exemption that makes it a little bit easier, but it's still being treated like a controlled drug rather than a medicine, and there are no actual products approved because they haven't created any kind of mechanism to get them approved.
And yet it seems that New Zealand actually has quite a good industrial tradition of growing plants for attributes. We could do this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the wine industry or even our sort of craft beer industry or the hops down in Nelson, there's plenty, we're definitely an agricultural country, and in fact, if you look at Australia again as a kind of example of what's going on, one of the big companies that's got involved there is Tasmanian Alkaloids. They're the number 2 poppy producer in the world, and they now have a subsidiary in Tasmania to grow medical cannabis. Yeah, you could easily envisage something like that here. Now, we of course don't want that to be the only route, because you then end up with these problems like you've got in Australia where it just takes too long and it's all about big business. That's an option that needs to be there, but you also need to have an ability for patients to grow their own, and especially for domestic production, because we want to get those prices right down so it's actually affordable and accessible to people, not just a kind of pipe dream of sometime in the future.
You talked about the pharmaceutical route as a bad thing, but I do kind of get what doctors are saying when they say, I'm not going to prescribe something whose potency and composition I don't know.
Yeah, I only think it's a problem if it's the only choice, because at the moment there are no products that meet that, and they're trying to deal with what is a herb or a plant through laws that are essentially designed for novel synthetic substances and all that. So, yeah, we're not saying that pharmaceutical approach is bad, but that there should be multiple options for people. And if you look at, say, opiates, right, which are a much riskier substance, you do have things like morphine and heroin and things available under medicines as well as being controlled drugs. But then you can also have poppy seed bagels in your bread or poppy seeds in your food. And that's not illegal. So you can have an approach like that for cannabis, where you treat it as a herb or a food at one level, and so that people can have their own. But if you want to prepare it as a medicine, then it goes through a pharmaceutical process.
Yet at the moment there does seem the fairly urgent matter of so-called green fairies being arrested. And I think even if you doubt the efficacy of some of the products, I don't think they're doing anyone any harm, and yet they are being dragged into court. What should happen there?
Well, I think especially with the change of government and the pathway to reform that they've laid out, with the medical cannabis taking priority, this referendum happening, the police need to be aware of that, change what they're doing. They could easily declare a moratorium on arresting people, or at least certain conditions. This is completely within their powers. And in fact, the police hierarchy in response to any media inquiries always say that officers have discretion. So what we need is for officers to actually start using that a lot more. Now, when the police have been busting these green ferries recently, they've become aware that it's medical and they've proceeded with it. Now, they could actually stop at that point and not proceed with it. This is totally within their powers. We all see this with driving down the road, where the police tolerate going to 60 or 110, or they tell you when they're changing that. It's really well publicised. Everyone knows what the tolerance is. It's not a guessing game or up to individual officers. It's very well stated. So this is what we think the police should do, especially as we're trying to have this conversation. Because if half the country is a criminal, you can't really have an open, honest discussion.
And just finally, my impression is that we will follow, if there's any model we'll follow, it's Canada. They're a fellow liberal democracy. They're taking a very methodical, cautious approach. Do you think we'll look to Canada?
Possibly. I think we need to learn from all countries out there that are doing it, and also pay attention to what's unique about New Zealand. Some of the concerns with Canada is that it's a little bit government-centric. They're sort of trying to set up an agency and have all cannabis supplies go through this government agency.
In some provinces, it's a government monopoly, isn't it?
But also, while they're putting this law through to create what they're doing on that level, they're closing down dispensaries and arresting a whole bunch of people, and it's kind of a bit of a dog's breakfast in Canada, but yeah, I see what you mean. It is a similar country that I think we could definitely learn a lot from.
Cool.
A question.
Oh, okay.
Do you think there's an issue of inclusivity when it comes to the wider discourse around drug law reform in terms of a lack of understanding?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of myths, of course, and a lot of issues around language that we use that create different impressions. I mean, even when people talk about recreational cannabis, it kind of just in the word, it implies partying in the streets or kind of being a bit irresponsible. So we prefer to call that adult use rather than recreational use. And then you find people are a lot more receptive to it. But certainly users need to be at the heart of any conversation around it. And as I say, if the police are still going hard arresting people, then that's really difficult to do. So they at least need to say some public statements about, hey, we're actually calling a halt to the arrest so that we can have this conversation.
Cool. If you have any more questions for Chris, the bucket is over there. You can write down the questions and he'll be back on the panel later on. Right, well, Chris, thank you very much, and we'll see you later on.
Okay.
You want to introduce our next guest?
Yes. Okay, now it is time to introduce ex-Herald data journalist. Now, is it just data without the journalism label? Is that data analyst?
Something like that.
Okay, I'll let you get to the mic.
Do you want to say Harkanwal's name?
Oh yeah, this is Harkanwal Singh. Hi. Why did you leave the Herald?
I'd been there for 4 years, and I was up to my 5th boss in 4 years. And when I had to explain data journalism again, I was like, that's it.
Oh, you're not going to believe what my next question is.
I know.
Like, I already know because I think I saw you speak at Auckland University, so I'm kind of an expert on data journalism myself. But for people who might not know, what is data journalism?
So everyone's kind of got their own definition. So I've got my own one, the way I practiced it. So the basic idea is, rather than using people as a source of stories and contacts, you use original data sources, and you analyze them yourself as well. Rather than going to an academic or going to a political party, you just do the analysis yourself. And in my case, I built interactive visualizations, which were slightly more objective than writing 400-word text and try and give the audience the whole data set.
And it makes kind of complex and quite loaded information more accessible to people. So
hopefully.
That's cool. Thanks for doing that. And where does it kind of sit within the context of a wider media world that so often thrives on sensationalist journalism?
Like
I imagine it's quite a combative relationship.
It kind of depends. If you're publishing the crime data, then it just works fine. You know, it kind of depends on your analysis, but there's always within newsrooms, especially bigger newsrooms, there's always space to do this kind of stuff. So there's always a balance. It's much bigger overseas. I imagine at this point, the New York Times data and graphics teams is about 50 people. We have about 2.5 people doing this in the newsroom. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask you how much more of a thing is data journalism now than when you first started doing it?
It is a thing.
It is a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
For a start. There's some quite good people who are in the team now. Keating is going to be joining the team.
Yeah, he's the new you.
Yeah. He wouldn't have joined 4 years ago, I imagine. So media's gotten better, or is trying to get it better at least, at using the data, just because there's more of it out there. And I hope things improve.
I remember when Keith first started doing data visualization, and it was quite a long time ago, and we were going to use some of his work on our TV show, and we didn't because it didn't look right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of one of the interesting things about data journalism, is that you kind of have to understand the art as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Was that hard for you?
It got easier as you practiced. I think it takes time. It takes interacting with the audience. On the Herald side, you get like 2 hours to be above the fold on the website, and if people click through and they leave after after 5 or 10 seconds and they don't understand, and you've just spent 2 months building something, then it doesn't work. And so one of the things that I learned was how to make things accessible to a wider audience and not just to the data geeks on Twitter. Yeah.
And you mentioned the 2.5 data journalists, and one of them is Lincoln Tan. So earlier this year, you and Lincoln were sort of propelled into the limelight, shall we say, by Winston Peters for the Herald's coverage of work visas and the top 5 source countries for work visas last year. He called it Herald propaganda written by 2 Asian immigrant reporters. How does it feel to have just like blatant facts, they're facts, right, challenged? Yeah. What is your response?
I wrote my response that day, but it was quite interesting because the data set is released by StatsNZ every month, and that's the data set they use to say immigration is at record levels, and it's the same data set. It's just that rather than publishing the press release from StatsNZ, I spent about a month analyzing it, and in the visualization, on the top, I mentioned that students translate to graduate visas later, but most of the people who come on work visas come from these countries. So I don't think it was going to be that much trouble. But obviously, it's election year, and that's not acceptable to actually publish detail like
facts
that.
are only facts if white people present them. Yeah. We all know this.
Yeah.
And of course, another story you worked on, which became extremely controversial, you had to do the presentations for what we now know as the Chinese-sounding names story. It was Phil Twyford's, housing ownership project. Could you see that was problematic even as you're working on it?
So I didn't do the presentation. I kind of did the translating of the data for the newsroom, and I was in the first meeting where Phil Twyford and Rob Salmon brought the data to the Herald, and they said we're not being racist as they handed over the data set. But I kind of delayed the publication by a week because it didn't make a lot of sense. There was like a lot of complexity to it, and I contacted Thomas Lumley and Edward Ibrahim, who works in Wellington, who are like the best statisticians in the country. And I went back to my editors and I said, look, you should publish it, but you should say that Labour is saying this and the statisticians are saying that it's not true. And I didn't think the editors wanted to publish that. It was kind of like a really pivotal moment for me working in a New Zealand newsroom, because that's kind of when I realized that things don't have to be true to be published. And the story ran with the headline, "We have Chinese buyers." And all I did was add some bullet points which basically said this data is wrong, but they were published like on the 5th page inside in a little box, and no one really saw them. So yeah, it was hugely problematic. And I saw, as an immigrant and as a person of color, I saw a huge problem with it. But no one else in the newsroom saw any problem with it. When I went and approached senior journalist, I was told it's a great story. And so yeah, I think it's still not been addressed, and no one's really addressed how they went about doing it. And a huge issue of data literacy if you're just going to publish analysis done by political parties for their own goals, and you're going to give it headlines like that. Yeah.
I wonder if that also indicates the value of social media and blogs, because both Keith, your replacement, and Tze Ming, who we heard from before, wrote forthright and useful analyses of what was published. Well, you must have been glad to see those, because it was kind of saying something you couldn't say, wasn't it?
Yeah, I gave Keith the draft of the story. But yeah, Keith was someone who I actually had the conversation about the data set. So generally I would talk with people outside the newsroom with anything I published for feedback. And I was quite glad that that happened. But at the same time, the social media bubble and the Herald front page are two very different things. And from my perspective, the story accomplished what Labour wanted it to accomplish, which was scaremongering and stuff. Yeah.
Now, Auckland has quite lively Indian and Chinese media. The former I'm quite thankfully privy to, but they're not all that visible outside these communities. Do you think Auckland is still struggling to reflect its own diversity in our media?
I think it's the other way around. Media is struggling to reflect Auckland's diversity rather than Auckland struggling to reflect its diversity in media. Part of the reason is the only reason I got a job in a newsroom was because I was technically better than anyone else there. It wasn't like, anyone thought they were increasing diversity. It was just I knew computers better than most people did. And it's been interesting for years in the Herald newsroom. I worked quite closely with Lincoln, who's probably the most experienced immigrant journalist, Asian journalist in a newsroom.
Asian immigrant journalist.
Yeah.
The three bad things.
Yeah. But I think the wider problem is it's just not just having people who are immigrants or from other backgrounds. I don't know this, but I've been in 3 newsrooms, Waikato Times, Stuff, Dominion Post 1 and the Herald. I've never seen a person of color in a leadership role. And
do you think there should be a diversity quota? What's your opinion on something like that?
No, I think people should be more aware of it. Like if you're a journalist and you're saying that we're reporting on the society and we're reflecting the society, then it's just like ethical and moral to actually reflect that. Like my example for this would be that when I was working on the Chinese sounding name story and I tried to raise the concerns, one of the journalists said to me, but you don't understand, those people don't integrate well like you have, That's kind of reflects what, the conversation is inside newsrooms.
Yeah.
So if you have editorial meetings where all the people sitting around the table are white, and if you're just like one Asian person, like I've been in those meetings,
Yeah,
you don't really want to voice like you guys are all wrong on this. You don't understand this. So it's a huge issue, and it's really interesting how it evolves, because if you walk on Queen Street and you go back to the Herald newsroom, those are 2 entirely different worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's us.
Okay.
Hey, Harkanwal will be back on the panel, so if you have any further questions, just remember the white bucket up on the bar there is a pen and pieces of paper. Oh, what sort of bar is this? A bar
There are pieces of paper. Matthew's holding them up.
Matthew's back. Yeah,
God bless
This
you,
is
Matthew.
why he's a hospitality legend. We'll be back in 5 or 10 minutes with Chris Bishop and Wallace Chapman. Cheers.
one's called Out of Space.
Kia ora, we're back. Oh, that was pleasing. It's always nice when people do stop talking. Thank you. Our next guest, Chris Bishop, might not be familiar to all of you because he's from Wellington, and because he's a National Party MP and you're a bunch of Liberals. But you know, Chris is kind of the National MP that gets on with the Liberals on Twitter. He's the social Liberal. And also, and I think this is kind of significant about Chris, is that while he was a List MP in 2014, in 2017 he took the traditionally Labor seat of Hutt South, and he did it by being a very good local candidate. Welcome, Chris.
Good to be here.
Let's talk about that first. I mean, because I get the impression that although we work under an MMP system, there have been a couple of things that have happened in recent years, and I'm also thinking of Michael Wood in Roskill, even though that was a Labor seat. He made a virtue of winning it as a local candidate, didn't he?
Yeah, and Michael, I've got to know Michael a bit because he came in the last Parliament. He's a really effective local MP, and really places a priority on that grassroots advocacy. I mean, he'd been involved in Roskill local politics for years and years. But look, as you know, an MMP, it's the party vote that counts. Our former party president used to drill that into us, that it's the party votes that determines the government. But I think there is a recognition that local advocacy is important as well. And if you look at someone like Nikki Kay, won Auckland Central, the tide was coming in back in 2008. National was doing really well, but that seat had never been held by National before ever, a bit like Hutt South actually. And, she won that seat, and, John Key really prized that, really recognised that she could, speak to people who perhaps hadn't been traditional National Party voters, and because to win a seat that's never been held by National before, you need to speak to people who haven't voted for National before. So that's really important.
So what's the trick to it? Is it being available?
Yep, turning up to the opening of an envelope, that helps. Look, I don't think there's anything, there's not rocket science, it's just hard work at the grassroots. So, in the Hutt, I did go to a lot of events, but I also ran a lot of events as well. So I was doing public meetings, every sort of 3 or 4 months on topical local issues, pushing things that I cared about. So the idea of developing the technology sector in the Hutt. Lower Hutt's got a huge business community centred around science and innovation. Got a lot of CRIs in the Hutt, so pushing the development of that, things like that. And just I did a lot with young people as well. Did a lot of work in schools. Did a lot of work with young enterprise. A lot of work with developing youth leadership potential and things like that. So, look, I think it's not nothing rocket science. It's just a lot of hard work at the grassroots.
And yet you won your seat, but you're not in government. You're in opposition, and I do get the feeling from and some National MPs, including you, that you feel a little bit robbed. Is there that mood in the party?
But like on the night Winston announced his verdict, Bill came up to me and said, "How does it feel, mate? You won Hutt South for National for the first time ever against the run of play, and we lost." And it was pretty tough, obviously. Look, it's a result that's never happened in New Zealand before. And constitutionally, and I've made this point before online, and I think to a few people in private. Constitutionally, of course, it's totally acceptable, and Dean Knight and various other people and people who study this stuff pointed it out. But politically, I think for a lot of New Zealanders, it's been quite hard to handle because, wrongly, people think that the highest polling party forms the government. And it's confused a bit by conventions in other countries, although not in New Zealand, but conventions in other countries where if you get the highest number of votes or most number of seats, the sort of convention is the Governor-General or the Queen has the, sort of works with you to form a government. Now, that's not the situation in New Zealand, but a lot of people, perhaps misinformed people, have made that point. So it's been quite hard for a lot of National Party supporters to handle. But look, the result is the result, I mean, and as I pointed out online before, in plenty of countries, governments change at the barrel of a gun. In New Zealand, the sky, rose the next day, the sun rose the next day, and Jacinda Ardern's our Prime Minister, and we just get on with it.
You wrote this, a post... You wrote a post for the spin-off, and you wrote that your government left New Zealand prouder, wealthier, more confident and aspirational than it had been before you took office. Which sounds like how could such an awesome government be voted out? Do you understand why maybe not everyone thought that? Maybe not everyone felt the love there?
Yeah, so I do think we were a good government, but I also don't think we were a perfect government. And in the preface to that spin-off piece, I said no government's perfect, and no government ever delivers on the dreams of its most fervent supporters, and that will be true for the Labour New Zealand First Greens government too. And already you can see a bit of disappointment amongst some sectors of the community about that. Okay, well, you know, that will be true. And it's true that the national government didn't achieve everything we set out to achieve. But I think when you look at across the broad range of metrics, we're a good government. We didn't get everything right. I think housing was a big miss, obviously. For people of my generation, my age, I'm 34, the prospect of owning a house is something that's a difficult one to grasp. And I think that was a fail for us. I think on things like material deprivation and hardship, particularly for kids, that was something we needed to do more of faster and sooner. I think we had enormous potential with the social investment model that we're rolling out. But yeah, look, no government's perfect.
You at one point, no, come on, you can write your question down. One day on Twitter recently, you heralded the new employment figures, which are indeed quite strong. The other thing that strikes me about those figures is if you take out the rest home workers settlement, real wages actually fell. And I wonder what's going on in New Zealand when labour demand is high and the price of labour falls. Should we be, outside party politics, what do we do about that?
It's probably a bit big for this conversation. I mean, that's one quarter. If you look across the last 10 years, real household income's up 40%. After-tax wages are up 25%, at twice the rate of inflation. Now we want to drive that up further, but you know the answer to that is a long-term structural problem that's been in the New Zealand economy for probably 40, 50 years, which is R&D and productivity. And lots of people have got different views about how we raise productivity, and lots of people have got reasons as to why our productivity is not what it should be. One of them is the distance from market conundrum. We're the furthest away from the rest of the world, although broadband and technology is changing that. The other is the low skills base in New Zealand, which we need to do more of. So, look, that's going to be a problem that the current government's going to grapple with, and one that we're going to work hard on opposition as well.
Actually, what kind of opposition are you going to be? Because I think people may be a little bit concerned about that quote from Bill English, it's not our job to make the place run. That sounds nihilistic. Are you going to be a loyal and vigorous but constructive opposition? Yeah,
look, I think so. I mean, we were pretty constructive just the other day with this proposal around more flexibility around paid parental leave. I mean, that was a genuine... a good idea, which I think most people acknowledge should happen, and for various reasons Labor decided it shouldn't happen, at least not straight away. So, we have 56 seats in the House. We are going to put up robust opposition to stuff we don't agree with. And look, I might have said after the election in relation to the Hutt, but it applies generally as well. When I agree with stuff that Labor does, I'll say so, or the National will say so, and when they don't agree with things, I'll say so as well. And the New Zealand public don't deserve anything less than that, and the 44.4 or whatever it was % of people who voted for National want us to do that as well. So I think we'll be constructive where we can be, but oppositional and confrontational when we have to be. But I think it's going to be a tricky balancing act, because one of the things that I think has defined Bill and John Key's leadership of National is quite a positive and upbeat message and vision. And opposition, and Andrew Little found this when he was opposition leader, and so did David Shearer and the leaders before that. Opposition means you have to be negative in some ways. You have to oppose, and actually people don't like that. And already I've had people emailing me saying, "Oh, you guys are so negative. You're so negative, so oppositional and stuff like that." But actually, the constitutional role of Her Majesty's loyal opposition is to critique. But actually, most New Zealanders are pretty. They like the positive in politics. So walking that fine line between being positive about the vision National's got for the country, but also critiquing is going to be tricky. And successive opposition leaders have struggled with that.
But because, I imagine that it's going to be quite hard. I mean, I don't think any National MP has voiced anything about the Lord Jacinda moment on Thursday night at the New Zealand Music Awards, because if you say anything about that, you are going to look like a dick.
Well, I was just angling for an invite to the Music Awards.
You should come
Didn't
along.
invite me. I'd love to have gone.
Well, no-
I went to the Lord concert on last week.
Well, this is actually one of the things I like about you is you paid for your own ticket and went to Lord. You're actually a music fan.
At the Bruce Mason Centre. Wanted to be at the power station, but yeah, with Bruce Mason.
And I actually kind of look at you and also look at Jacinda Ardern, who's someone who's been to Splore because she wanted to go. She feels a little bit like my tribe in that respect. So there's a kind of a... Is there a cultural demographic there?
Yeah, well, Jacinda's an old friend of mine. I mean, I've known her for 15 years. We're involved in schools debating for a while. She was a schools debating coach when I was coming up through schools debating, and then we were administrators together and stuff. So I've known her for ages, and
Were you always like you were the young Nat and she was the young Labour?
Oh, she's a touch older than me, so the generations didn't quite cross over at university. She's three years older than me, I think, or maybe 4. But look, and I served on the Justice Committee with her in the last Parliament. I don't agree with her on much stuff. Well, I agree with her on actually probably more than probably people in the room think. But and I wish her the best as Prime Minister. And look, there is one part of me which is like, I'm 34. It's cool that a 37 or 38-year-old person of my age that I know is Prime Minister. That is genuinely pretty cool. I just wish she'd change her stance on a few things, but that's cool. That's all right. That's politics.
Chris Bishop, thanks very much, and come back and join us on the panel because I'm sure there'll be a few other questions. Cheers. And don't forget, you can ask the questions. There is the white bucket over there. Chris, he's run for the bar. Now, about 9 years ago, me and our next guest were looking at our big break. TVNZ7 was launching and looking for new talent, and they gave us both shows. My show was called Media 7, and his was called Backbenchers. As it happens, in the last couple of months, both of them have come to the end of their run. Put it that way. It's been a pretty good run, and the difference is that we got to say goodbye properly. I mean, our show's been through 3 iterations, but it's still the same project, and we got to say goodbye. Poor old Wallace, last show of the season, the day before the NZ On Air funding round announcement, and you never got to say goodbye, Wallace.
No, I didn't, and I've got to say, look, it's great to be here, and what an icon. Round of applause for Russell Brown here. It's just like, fuck, we're in the same space together. High fives. Here we go. Wow. In terms of saying goodbye, it wasn't a big deal. I'm not a big goodbye fan. It's just like I can always recall a sort of a story when a show that I loved, Russell, which was Eating Media Lunch, and Jeremy Wells get pulled into the sort of a commissioner's booth at TVNZ and says, "Your show's been canned," and Jeremy Wells said, "Good." Enough. 10 years is a century in TV. It's a century.
Yeah, it is. It's an extraordinarily long time. What I was always impressed about with your show was that you had, and we actually have some of them here. We have the people who...
oh my God.
Yes.
The marijuana men.
The marijuana
Gary.
men.
Dr. Green. They gave me fucking assholes every single Wednesday for 10 years. And you're here. Did you know I was coming?
Yes.
That's outrageous.
Yeah, no, they came up from Wellington. Gary came up from Wellington because he knew he was
this guy,
doing it.
Gary, he smokes a lot of pot. He's like my brother. He's like my brother. Yeah, he's a fan, not a stalker. They're here. Shit.
Yeah, no, they came up. Well, I mean, I think it was a real testament to what you do that people treated it like the public square and they wanted to be there. And some of them were there every week.
That was the proudest thing, just in a nutshell. I'm not going to bang on about the show called Backbenchers, which some might have seen, some didn't. But it was, for those who didn't see, it was a show set in a pub called the Backbench, in Wellington from 2008. And we'd count down in my ear, 5, 4, 3, you're on. And it was live in a bar. And it was a very, very unique concept. And people like Gary and Dr. Green here and a whole lot of people would pile on in and watch us debate with backbench MPs. And it was a bizarre concept. It was a weird concept. But over time, it worked. It didn't work at the start. It did not work at the start, Russell. But over time, it became, I suppose, a cult watch.
Well, and one thing that struck me, Wallace, is that with Media 7, we did a show in Wellington once, and I got your comms. If you don't know, comms are what we have in our ears, so we can hear the director and know vaguely what's going on. And they gave me Wallace's comms set to Wallace's level. Oh, my God.
Boom.
It was so loud.
10.
But that was a reflection of that environment, wasn't it?
In the early days, when it was live on TV News 7, there would be like sort of 110, 112 people, and it was 9 p.m, so it was a drinking crowd. Kind of revelling assholes like Chris Bishop, the guy you had, would sort of pile on in and just make a lot of noise. His mates like Todd Barclay would come on in save it for the panel.
He's Todd Barclay, the former tobacco lobbyist we don't like.
And would make a lot of noise, and it would be up to me to sort of corral this unusual drinking crowd. But it was an unusual format. And, I mean, for example, there was one guy, there was this Texan judge that came in once. I can always recall, about 2011, and he was a senior judge in all of Texas, the guy who sort of put people under. And he goes, wow, what a concept, huh? Okay, yeah. He goes, so this is a real bar? Okay, yep, it's a pub. So it's not a stage? No. So these are real members of Parliament? Yeah, I said, yeah. He goes, wow. I said, what's wow about it? He goes, in the US, this would never happen. It would never happen.
And actually, interestingly enough, I talked to some of the delegates from the Drug Law Symposium, which was on in July, and I came over with them. Unfortunately, went past the marijuana chaps outside, and then had to be on camera.
Always. You guys are crazy.
Yeah. Just walk past and sniff, I think, next time. But they had the same view, and they couldn't believe that there you were sitting down asking members of Parliament whether they'd ever smoked marijuana or not. And there's this familiarity about New Zealand that lets us do that, isn't there?
Yeah, I don't want to sort of go on about it too much, but those 10 years of that format back, it was a very unique model. There was no other show like it in the world where you had that sort of proximity, Russell. It was like sort of it was like Media Taka, it was like Media 7. You've got a square like this. You've got a drinking audience. It's live. There's no security. You've got senior members of Parliament. It's like, fuck, what can happen? It wouldn't happen in the United Kingdom. It would not happen in Texas. It wouldn't happen in Australia. And many, many times would have sort of senior representatives coming over from across Parliament, being absolutely wowed by the format, and staying for a long time, hanging out with me, sort of saying, wouldn't this be great in Canberra, this sort of model, Wouldn't this be great in Phnom Penh? Wouldn't this be great in Singapore? Wouldn't this be great in Texas or New York, And I suppose if there was one of my saddest moments in broadcasting history, it was when I got a call saying, we have a chance for Backbenchers TV to go to the United Kingdom and do 2 shows at the iconic Red Lion Tavern, which is their version of the Backbencher, right across from Westminster. And I said, you've got to be kidding. And we put 2 months into getting 2 shows together. One on the New Zealand-UK economy, one on climate change. We got 4 UK MPs each. We had the tickets booked. We had the promo done. It was going to be called Backbenchers UK. It was all done.
Snappy.
Flights were booked. Thank you, Jossel. And what happened? The Sky TV News of the World scandal broke, and all the MPs pulled out one by one.
Oh, that's a shame.
Didn't happen.
Now, we should also talk about what you're doing now. You get to talk to a lot of well-known people on that Sunday morning show, which you have made your own. How's that been? Because you seem to have, again, that's something that maybe it was a challenge at first, but you've made it your own.
I do the show on Sunday morning on Hands Up those who listen to RNZ. Radio New Zealand.
Yeah,
all right,
I love how you were trying to explain that to this audience.
Well, it's not a given.
Have you heard that? RNZ National, it's very good.
It's not a given, but 4 years ago, because I was doing a similar sort of show on Radio Live, and I suppose it's just about backing yourself, but on the final day of submissions, a senior journalist rang me and said, have you applied for the job on Radio New Zealand? I said, no, because I wouldn't get it. And he goes, well, dude, they close in 2 hours' time. Are you seriously telling me you're not going to apply? And I go, no, because I'm not going to get it. I mean, you've got the Hewitt Humphreys, you've got the Todd Niles, you've got the Marty Dudas, you know, you've got the Kim Hills. Wallace Chapman ain't going to...
You're shitting me. You're seriously telling me that you applied for that with 2 hours before deadline?
This is a true story. This is a true story. And this senior journalist, I'll tell you after, I'm not going to... he goes, just apply. You'll be a great fit. I applied. I got a phone call. Long story short, I got the job. At the time, the backdrop to that was, because I was an outside chance, but the backdrop to that was that at the time on Radio Live, I was doing a fuck a lot of radio. I was filling in, the Roastbusters case had just broken. So Willie and JT had been pulled off the air. And I got a phone call from Rick, the program director of Radio Live, Sunday night, we've got a problem. We've got a major show on Radio Live, hasn't got a host. Can you fill in? I said, you've been pulling for the Roastbusters. I'm not going to do it. You kidding me? It's just crazy. It's just like suicide. And he goes, do it. I ended up loving it. I did it for 5 months. I got the job. So the backdrop to RNZ was I was doing a hell of a lot of radio, and at the audition, I just nailed it. I got the job.
Yeah, well done. Now, this looks like...
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
This looks like exciting times for RNZ. Labour's RNZ Plus plan implies the expansion to online and TV. And it seems a happy ship at the moment. I mean, you must be quite excited about the prospects.
You know what? I've got to say, working for Radio New Zealand is like BFM, like when I worked at BFM. It's just a dream job, Russell. I kick myself. Even this morning going in, waking up at 5 a.m, going and starting at 7. It's just an absolute dream job. I absolutely love it. Like the good ship B, I just so enjoyed. I'm sort of kind of an accident broadcaster. It wasn't design. I've never sort of wanted to be a broadcaster, but here I am. I've got to say though,
that's actually a very interesting thing. You came as creative director. You were writing ads.
Yeah, that's right.
Charlotte Ryan arrived as a marketing person.
Yeah.
Hugh started on the front desk. He was the receptionist. There's actually quite a track record of people who never intended to be in radio.
It's the BFM accident broadcasters, but it's. I mean, I filled in for your show. On that's kind of how I started, Russell. Filling in for you and filling in for breakfast. Got to know my own voice back at Radio 1 as well. But working for Radio New Zealand was a bit tough because in 2014 that was a new intake. And it wasn't all roses because when I first started, Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson started. They'd taken over from Jeff Robinson and Sean Plunkett. And I've got to say, it's a juggernaut now, but the first book came through, the ratings fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
And I can remember getting that email through and the boss going, nothing to worry about, too much. We're down by 60,000 people. I mean, seriously, it was not cool. Herald, John Drinner started printing stories, like a lot of stories. What's the future of RNZ? These new cats coming in. Happy to say now, not blowing RNZ's trumpet, but it's just a juggernaut. It's huge. I mean, in terms of, if you ask me how my show is doing, it's nudging 300,000 people a Sunday. It's extraordinary. I'd like to say it's due to me. It's probably not. If I left, it'll be, it'll still continue. But it's a pleasure to be part of the Good Ship RNZ.
Well, as a freelance print journalist, I'd just like to say, are there any jobs going?
There actually are quite a few, Russell. If you go to rnz.co, scroll to the bottom and click About and Careers, there's one for you.
Oh, nice one. Thanks, Wallace. Just one more thing, because we have Julia Deans coming up very, very shortly. Oh, wow. One thing I'll always remember about when TVNZ7 was starting up, and we had, I think, our show was launching with me and Simon Pound, and later on we took on Jogai. Your show was launching with you and Damien Christie, later on Charlotte Ryan, and we were banned from mentioning our BFM heritage because it was a brand clash. I really thought they got that wrong.
They got it really wrong, and just in terms of brand clashes, I've always long thought that that's a shocking decision. New Zealand's a small country, and why would you brand? Now it's all about sort of simpatico and sort of combining strengths. Shit, I've combined strengths for years. You know, it's just like, mention BFM when you can. Why not? Recall Sean Plunkett, the massive fight that he had just to try and get another outside gig when he was doing Morning Report. You know, he sort of started doing a blog about it. You know, Sean does crafts. It was actually a very good blog too, by the way. But in terms of BFM, that station and being there for 6 years, Russell, taught me so much about broadcasting and authentic broadcasting. I'll always cherish those days. Round of applause, BFM. Come on. Yeah. What a great station.
And I'm happy to say it is still the talent factory. I mean, we've been, not just Jogai, but Shamina, in the last one of these events we did, it's still pumping it out.
Absolutely.
And more than ever, it's young women, which is great as well.
Very cool.
So, anyway, I have been promising you Julia Deans all along. I should maybe explain a little bit about how this came to be. A few weeks ago, there was a showcase where Julia was playing songs. It was just a little industry thing in this bar here. And Julia was playing songs from her forthcoming album, We Light Fire. And I think everyone in the room was absolutely stunned at how good she sounded and how good the song sounded. And I think she's singing better than ever. And at that point, I thought, we were actually planning this one, and I thought, we could have Julia. And her manager was there, so we sorted that out on the night, and I'm absolutely delighted. I think she's going to play 3 or 4 songs, and then we'll be back with the panel. So please welcome Julia Deans. Is she here? Yay!
These stray microphones sitting on the ground, it looks like people have just been dropping them. Good work, guys. Hi. I brought my snotty tissue with me. You'll all be pleased to know. So yeah, I'm going to play you a few songs from my forthcoming album. As Russell said, I'm just repeating information for you. I'm gonna lose you to my pride. I'm gonna lose you to my pride. Without you knowing. Draw back the shades, I'm coming round. Turn up the lights, I'm coming around. Well, I left you knowing that my heart was empty without you knowing. Thank you. I think my voice is still hung over from going to the music awards. So, yeah. You too? Yeah. Yay! This next song is the title track from my album, We Light Fire. The album's going to be out at the end of April, by the way. Yay! Repeating. And this song, with this album, I've tried to, instead of sort of just arguing with the voices in my head about me, because that's what we all do, I've tried to, I don't know, look further afield and look at what unites us as humans, as a species, I guess, and as a community. You know, we're in our own little pockets, globally as well as locally, and I think as you get further through life, obviously, you know, people you encounter the bigger changes a lot more. Things like, you know, new people arriving in your life, people that have been there your entire life, leaving the planet, you know, big milestones that kind of happen, and I think it's sort of thinking about these big things that happen. Something occurred to me was that one thing that really unites us across the world and sort of in every culture is the use of fire as a way to mark these momentous occasions. So that was my long story to explain that that's what this song is about. We light fire movements, the distance from here to now. We light fire for the tears in our eyes. We light fire waiting for the sunrise. We don't know that we're always gonna feel this way, but we're here today with our hearts aflame. All I want in this life is a light to relieve me from the cold and the dark till the dawn. You cool my head in the heat of the day, and you lead me through the night and the calm and the storm. We light fire. We light fire. We light fire. We light fire. We light fire for the tears in our eyes. We light fire waiting for the sunrise. We don't know that we're always gonna feel this way, but we're here today with our hearts Thank you very much. I've just got one more for you. Well, Hugh only did the graphics for 3, so... This is my single, which I put out about a month ago, and it's called Walking in the Sun, and yeah, it's about basically saying, stop being dicks to each other. We could do some really cool shit. It was way more succinct than the last one, hey? You took the hand, took the hand you gave her. You shook the heart, felt the ground swell under your feet. You locked the room, built a crystal border, told her it was good, it was good, it was all the good advice. You were only having fun, maintaining the line. Could be walking in the sun, could take a shot for the moon. When we reach for the heavens end, we could be happy again. We should be walking in the sun. Taking. You lose control if you don't sweep her off her feet. It's not a plan, just a flawed persistence. Keep her underground, underneath your broken thumb. It's how it's always done. You walk in his shoes like father hands to son, inherit the land. We should be walking in the sun. Take a shot for the moon. When we reach for the heavens, then we could be happy again. We should be walking in the sun. Take a shot for the moon. When we reach for the stars, my friend, we could be happy again when we walk in the sun. Take a shot for the moon. We could be happy again. We should be walking in the sun. Thank you.
Don't go away. Julia Deans, everyone. I know we actually have a little more time. Do you want to do one off the first album? Go on, play one of the bangers, and then we'll have a chat. Yeah, play one of the bangers from the first album. And while that's happening, if we could have our other guests sneak around the back so you don't get on camera, and then we'll have the panel for about the last 20 minutes of this wonderful event. Cheers. Okay, go.
Oh God. Okay. This song is called "The Wish You Wish You Had," and it's about not giving a shit what other people keep telling you to do. Stop it. Sooner or later you're gonna find you've been left out on your own. When nothing quite fits and a little critic keeps your case at home, you gotta take a look at yourself. A little luxury. Really take a look at yourself. And did you give it all you had? I'm sorry, it's no good for me. Your stories all make believe it's only I wish you had. I'm sorry, it's no good for me. Your stories all make believe it's only I wish you had. One of these days you'll admit you should have kept your contact close. There's nothing like fickle alliances to release your friends from foes. You gotta take a look at yourself. A little luxury. Really take a look at yourself. And did you give it all you had? I'm sorry, it's no good for me. Your stories all make believe it's only I wish you had. I'm sorry, it's no good for me. Your stories all make believe it's only I wish you had. I'm sorry. Ooh. There's my bass solo. Your story. Ooh. So come on, take a look at yourself. A little luxury. Really start to see yourself. Did you give it all you had? I'm sorry, it's no good for me. Your stories all make believe it's only I
Now, while our other guests are making their way around here, and we'll see everyone here and there, Julia, a couple of questions. Is it 7 years since your last album? Why 7 years? Why has it been so long? Up to the mic.
A number of reasons. I moved back to New Zealand. We built a studio in the garage under our house. And I started taking on all these different, sort of doing different projects. I've spent pretty much my entire life playing my own songs, and I was one of those really crap guests at a campfire sing along, and people would go, "Oh, here you can play guitar. Can you play this song? Play us this song." And I don't know any songs. I only know my songs, and they're not that fun to sing along to. But so I ventured out and I got involved in like the Brel show, a Joni Mitchell show. I did musical theatre for the first time in my life.
You did Jesus Christ Superstar. You played the whore.
I was the whore. And I've just been trying all these different, new different things, and it's been awesome. I've had a really fun time, but it sort of has taken a lot more energy than I thought, and put the album itself on the, consistently putting it on the back burner.
One thing I thought when I saw you at that little showcase here was I thought you were singing better than ever, and I thought, is that because you've actually been able to sing for a job? Whereas you made that last album, you were working in a dress shop.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I think that's definitely helped. Also, stepping away from behind the guitar, I've played guitar for all of my performing life. So I think suddenly having the freedom to not think about this coordination thing, after the initial kind of freak out of like, what do I do with my hands? I've been really enjoying it. So. Yeah.
Cool. One last question.
Yes.
What do you think of the Music Awards? I actually thought it ran pretty well this year. It was quite tight.
Yeah, it did. I thought it was a very slick production, and I thought there was a lot of it was a really broad representation of music and culture, I guess. It was fun. I had a fun night.
Yeah. I mean, it's odd. There's this story in the Herald on Sunday saying that it's all going to change, but I'm not sure that's. I don't think it needs to. I think it works as what it is.
Who knows? Who knows where that came from, and who knows if it's true, Like, as was said before, it doesn't have to be true to be printed.
Right, okay. Just before you go, plug your tour. Do you have a tour to plug?
No.
And you don't have an album out till April. Well, well, thank you for coming anyway.
Thank you
Cheers.
for having
Julia
me.
Deans. Sort yourselves out. Where's Jogai? You can come up here. When you're going to need some of you down at this table here, and I guess 4 of us up here. We have nine of us all together. It's the biggest bill we've ever had at one of these things. Look, there are microphones all over the ground, so.
Was there 4 up there, 5 there?
Yeah, okay, four of us up here. Chris Bishop, you come up. We have some quite good questions, actually. Thank you for the questions, everyone who left questions. And we do it because it's actually one of the things about getting people to write down questions is, well, there's 2 things. One is that it stops people standing up and giving a personal statement. And the other thing is that often questions are funnier written down because people get to think about it. Most people aren't that good at delivering a question live. Okay, do we have a volunteer to come up here? Come on, we need one more person up here. All right, Wallace. There we go. And there you are.
Let's swap.
Okay.
Okay.
No, it's not. Hey, isn't this a modern miracle? As that sound men mix the sounds and they do it at gigs here on an iPad. It's kind of amazing. Okay, go.
Okay, straight after that, question for Chris Bishop. Has he ever considered that he is in the wrong political party?
I have been asked that before. No, look, I mean, my view on the big dividing line in New Zealand politics at the moment, it is about openness and attitude to the outside world. And I was saying to Wallace before that if the National Party had done a stunt like Phil Twyford and Rob Salmon did with the Chinese-sounding names thing, we would have been completely pilloried, including by many people in this room. We would have been absolutely destroyed. That was an outrageous attack on a minority in New Zealand, and a lot of people just let the Labour Party get away with it because they wanted Labour to win the election. And I think the big dividing line in politics is about attitude to the outside world, and I think in New Zealand politics today, only the National Party is the party that stands for a New Zealand which is tolerant and open.
That's enough, I want to move on. Well done, Chris. Good. Next question.
Well, actually, I have a...
So backbenchers, sorry.
I have a supplementary there. Chris, you were at the Drug Law Symposium in July, and I sensed a certain frustration about what you felt you could say, because I sense that you are a law reformer and you would like to see that happen. It's probably going to be, whatever happens, it's probably going to be a conscience vote. Where are national MPs' votes going to go on drug law reform?
Well, the party hasn't made a call yet on if it'll be a conscience vote, but if you look at what happened in 2003 when Matilia Touré's bill came up, it was a conscience vote, so I hope it is a conscience vote. That's probably enough said. But look, I'm a bit worried about the referendum proposal. Now, be careful what you wish for. I'm not sure a referendum is the right place to conduct a sensible, evidence-based, informed debate about drug law. Because I'm telling you now, there are a lot of people out there whose last wish is an evidence-based, informed debate about drug law reform. And they will have voices, and they will spend a lot of money, and they will not monopolise, but they will put their view into the public domain and toxify the debate. And actually, I think, I may be wrong, but I think we will come to regret the referendum proposal. It seems elegant and it seems clever, but actually referenda are the wrong place to decide finely grained public policy questions like drug law reform, particularly a debate where there's so many different elements and people impute their own interpretation about what each word means. So the debate around decriminalisation versus legalisation, like there's a lot in that, like a lot. And, you know, even finding the wording of the referendum question is going to be massively politically contentious. So, you know, it sounds good, but be careful what you wish for if you're a drug law reformer.
Quick comment on that, Chris Fowlie.
Well, I would agree. It is going to come with some fishhooks, and it's up to us to best manage that process and you know, think ahead as to what these arguments could be, neutralise them before they're raised, and be better organised and better funded than the opposition. I'm really looking forward personally to Family First coming out in opposition, because they're like our perfect opponents.
Question here for the European correspondents. We know the far right in the US has been emboldened by Trump, but to what do you attribute the rise of the far right in Europe?
Well, in certain parts of Europe, the sheer fact that certain Nazi parties from the 1940s still exist today and are in government in certain states. So there's a pre-existing alt-right racism which has been in Europe for a long time and has never been satisfactorily confronted by the EU or individual countries.
Tze Ming?
Yeah, I mean, the far right was historically repressed in the Eastern Bloc by the Soviet Union and the Communist Bloc, and so post-Cold War it was kind of inevitable. It's been like a slow burn ever since then of them, you know, they never, you know, not unlike, you know, East Germany, unlike West Germany, they never had to go to school and learn about how it was really bad that the Nazis exterminated the Jews. It's an entire generational turnover where, you know, that memory has been lost.
Next question then.
Right.
What have we got?
If Canada is not a great example of cannabis law reform, which countries are?
Colorado.
Colorado is not a country.
If only it was.
Yeah, if only, Colorado is worth looking at for sure, but I think what we could be looking at is Spain. They have around 1,000 cannabis social clubs. They're run as non-profits, they're members only, they're adults only. They seem to be working pretty well. And it's a model that I think is really applicable to New Zealand when you think about things like RSAs or these sorts of, or even like the liquor licensing trusts that you have out in West Auckland and some other parts of the country. So all the profits can be retained or go back as grants into the community. It's a non-commercialised approach, but yet you still have actual provision of cannabis through legitimate means, and you can have testing in the clubs and things like that. You're not just leaving it to the black market.
Yeah, I think we should talk more about cannabis clubs here, actually. What do you got?
Another question. Wallace, why was it called Roastbusters?
Why was it called Roastbusters? That's a really good... well, it was a... remind me, Russell?
I actually almost don't want to go there with this one because it just glorifies those...
Shall we skip
pricks.
it?
Yeah, let's skip it.
Yeah, sorry to whoever's question that was.
It was an awful example of sexual abuse amongst two young guys who are bragging on Facebook about the issue. John Tamahere has said something very, very controversial on air. They got pulled, and it was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're not.
Can I skip to... Okay.
Okay.
Harkanwal, you said you spent a month analysing the data. What does that mean? Were you looking at the data or playing with the ways to present it?
It's about everything. So you spend most of the time cleaning up a data set. It's not a glorious job. And then you kind of start asking questions from the data. So one of the definitions is rather than asking questions of people, you ask questions of the data set. And you find sort of interesting ways to tell a story. So, for example, with a crime data set, you are looking for patterns. Whereas, if you're writing a story, you're looking for shocking statistics. And if you're doing data journalism, you're looking at distributions and what is actually there. And then you get to the fun part of visualizing it and trying to tell the story. And that's about it. Yeah.
Now, a lot of that is dealing with official data, and everyone I know who deals with that complains about the way it's provided by the public sector. Has it improved at all? But I mean, I guess you're not still getting stuff as a PDF?
If you do Official Information Act requests, you still get it as a PDF.
Eesh.
Yeah.
That's just absolutely obstructive.
It's improved. It is so. The interesting thing is that every department tries to do their own thing, and it's still like that. StatSense, it's trying to make improvements, but it's a very, very slow process. Like I was doing it for 4 years, and even now, I was looking for an interesting data set on how internal migration happens in New Zealand. Like how people from different ethnicities move within Auckland and to other places. And it was a spreadsheet with 32 tables, and you'd probably spend like 2 weeks extracting it. It's still a huge issue, which I hope becomes a priority now, somewhat.
Tze Ming, what's your impression of the way we do this stuff here? Because you are working on your PhD at the moment, and it involves data around ethnicity, doesn't it? Do we do it well?
Do we do ethnicity well?
Yeah, wouldn't I? Do we do data about ethnicity well? Let's set the bar a bit lower.
Okay, so ask the question again. Sure what you mean.
Is the way that public data like that, is it presented well here in comparison
to the UK? No, New Zealand's way behind the UK in terms of the open data. There's a lot more accessible in the UK. There's massive social science data sets that are literally just in something called the UK Data Archive, and if you've got a student ID number, essentially, you can download these massive data sets in the microdata format. labour force survey, or general social surveys. It's like a huge database of surveys you can run at any time. Anyone can do it. There's, by comparison, Stats New Zealanders, they're doing pretty good work, but, it's very difficult to just access the data. You've got to jump through more hoops. There's more limited data available, and I think that's something they're working on. I think Harkanwal probably knows a little more about how they're going.
So Stats NZ now has this thing called Integrated Data Infrastructure, or IDI, which is what the social investment thing was going to be based on. But it's only accessible to researchers or people doing that kind of stuff, and you have to sign an agreement, and there's all kinds of hoops, and they're legitimately trying to improve it, but compared to UK, we are really far behind. Yeah.
Oh, well, there's something to improve on, something to work on, Chris. Tina, question for you, and two people asked this, actually. Update on the St James, because you are my contact person for what the hell's going on with the St James rescue refurbishment project. Where are we at?
It's my little baby. It's going forward very slowly. It's quite exciting for me that there has been a change in government. Sorry. We've spent years and years and years trying to get an answer from the last Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage, who I have to say in the 7 years of working the project I never spoke to, unfortunately. I now have a Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage that happens to be the Prime Minister. And so it helps. But I, on a broader scale, I find it interesting that our Arts, Culture and Heritage also now have two associates. So we've got Carmel Sepuloni and Grant Robertson. So I think it's going to be well and truly taken care of, and I think it needs a little bit of effort and work going forward. St James has had council funding. So the floors have all been ripped up and the foundations have started going through. We're at design process and everything. The hold up now, and I keep on getting messages. I got 4 messages today, actually. The St James has been ripped down, and it hasn't. So if you look from Queen Street, it looks like all the buildings have been demolished. But if you go from Lawn Street, the St James is still sitting there. The buildings that have been demolished are the apartment building that's about to go up. And what makes this whole project really interesting is that it's a housing project. It's actually not about arts, culture and heritage, which is quite fascinating. So what the delay is that the apartment buildings that are going around are held up more at a government level, which is why we've managed to tick off all the council stuff but not the government, to do with reserve banks and lending criteria and the fact that our banking is predominantly reliant on Australian banking, and they have their own laws around the size of projects and lending criteria around that. So St James is one of 7 housing projects in Auckland Central at the moment that are sitting on pause, that are fully consented, fully planned, fully designed, fully financed, can't do anything with them. So from a housing perspective, that's a really massive thing. So, am I allowed to say something a little bit positive about Phil Twyford?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. One of the exciting things that happened on the first week of the new government is we had a housing minister for the first time that said on his second point he wanted to look at high-density urban developments that were on pause in our cities. So he is a housing minister that recognises that there has been that problem, and that's a really easy way to tick off a whole lot of housing going forward in the city.
Can I just, because I saw James Brown at the St James. I mean, it was an extraordinary, iconic sort of concert in a venue. Is it still going to be a venue where there's a 2,000-seater and you can go and see people like Mavis Staples or James Brown or others?
I think the only thing they're probably not going to be able to do for my generation, which I've written about but I haven't verbally said, is we're probably not going to be able to have the dance parties where we leave holes in the walls. Sorry, guys. Just going to put that out there. But the guy that technically owns it, a guy called Steve Bealby, who works for the Notable Properties Trust, and his whole job is to sit between council and private developers and negotiate all those deals. So he negotiated with the guy that wanted to build the apartments $1 for dollar. Every time we got fundraising from council government, the developer put in $1. Pretty easy way to half the price. So the council put in what they put in. He put in $1 for match it, so it brought it up pretty spectacularly to about 25 mil which is a pretty easy way to raise some money. So the cool thing is he's a really young guy. His family is involved in all these heritage builds around the city, Edale House, and a whole lot of stuff that happens around the city. And he's so good to talk to, and he's really enthusiastic about having a theatre that sits in between. If you think about the ITS Centre, the Civic, I worked on the Civic, that's my background is in heritage building construction, Civic Theatre, the Basement Theatre, the comedy clubs, the art gallery behind, the library. You've got this big block that's just sitting there that's stopping the connect, and he is so excited to reconnect those two parts of the city, and it's really cool. But it's really exciting that it's not arts, it's actually housing.
I have to say, I heard him interviewed, and I thought the best story that he told was going through the venue when they first got back in, with people from the library across the road who were looking for things they might collect for posterity. And they were walking along and these things were sticking to their feet. It was like, these little Ziploc bags, where do they come from? And it was explained to the library people that they were perhaps from the dance parties, and they actually made the decision that was cultural heritage, and they have collected some.
Also, I have to say, to add to that story, the library are now in a possession of a rather large collection of stuff that went through their projectors that might not be for public viewing.
Right, we've got 10 more minutes. Okay, what have you got? You got another question?
Yeah, I don't know about you, Russell, but I'm quite interested in this relationship over here. It's quite a bit of camaraderie, dare I say it, quite a bit of banter. Can you guys? Oh, it's very sweet.
Let me start.
Just can you guys touch a little bit?
Let me knock this on the head right now. I'm not a Chardonnay socialist like this guy over here. No, actually, that's a really interesting point. Because I did a show for 10 years called Backbenchers, right? And reading the general media, you'd think that, say, for example, Labour and National are poles apart. I can tell you, from 10 years in the fucking green room upstairs, there would be all the backbenchers coming in, and there'd be more commonalities than differences. It's quite extraordinary. So you'd have your Alfred Naros with your sort of Julianne Gentis. You know, you'd have your sort of Maureen Pughs with your Jacinda Ardern. There'd be more seeing eye to eye. It's really quite interesting. It's not like the US media, and it's not like the US round where I think it was when Todd, if I can say this, Todd McClay, who was a backbencher then, went on a fact-finding trip to the US, and he says, my God, it blew me away. He goes, why, Todd? He goes, because the Democrats there in the US were so far to the right, I couldn't even relate to it. You know? He said the Democrats were so right-wing, it blew me away. Republicans were off the spectrum. Or to quote Noam Chomsky, the Republicans in the US are not a normal party, they're what's called these days a radical insurgency. You know? So when it comes to sort of seeing eye to eye, it's not that I see eye to eye with Chris Bishop, but there are commonalities we can agree with, you know?
And Chris, can you touch a little bit on the relationship between politics and the media and your personal perspective?
I first met this guy, but my backbenchers went for, 10 years? Yeah, 10 years. And I sort of lived through the whole thing. So I started life in politics as a researcher. That was my job before I became an advisor for national and government. So I first started going to backbenchers in 2007 when it started. Or 2008, early 2008, and I was a researcher for Jerry Brownlee in opposition, and it was a funny little show. You're right, no one really knew what to make of it for quite a long time. It was and particularly in the early years, it didn't quite become this in the later years, but particularly in the early years, it was really a gathering point for anyone interested in politics. A bit like this actually, sort of politics and just a general conversation and a drink and a couple of drinks, maybe 3 drinks, and. And it was great. You had staffers there from National and Labour and the Greens and politicians, and like if you're a 21-year-old who's at Vic Uni across the road, you just walk 500 metres up the road to the backbencher and you can meet 5 MPs in a night and just go up to them and say, hey, I want to volunteer for you, or what's your stance on drug law reform, or what's your stance on just whatever. Like, it's an amazing thing, and that's how we first met. And then I became a staffer, and then I became an MP, and then Wallace got me on the show as an MP, and it's quite a tough crowd for National Party politicians, a bit like this one. But, it was good fun. It was good. And we just come to know each other, And you had me on Sunday morning as well, once.
This is actually quite an interesting point. Bring up sort of what is the commonality and differences between because a lot of the sort of differences are played out. But if you go behind the scenes, there are actually a lot of... it's not horse trading. That's not what it's not. But there is a lot of sort of similarities. It's quite interesting. And the green room chats across parties, for me personally, were very, very revealing what similarities they held.
Got some spicy green room chats to share?
Yeah, I have, but that goes on the blog one day. But not for tonight.
In the memoir. We have a question which is I'm going to ask it to everyone, and anyone can put their hand up. Are we a post-neoliberal society? I never knew what neoliberal means. It's kind of...
What does even that mean? What is neoliberal? I get really worked up about this. Neoliberal. It's a bullshit word. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous phrase.
Not a ridiculous word. It's like an internationally recognised description of economic and fiscal policy. Dumbass. Sorry.
But are we post it?
We're not post it. Until they amend the Reserve Bank Act.
What, to focus on, not inflation? So,
well,
what does that even mean?
Things as well as inflation.
But what does that mean, though? Well, they are going to amend it, but
exactly.
It's not going to do anything.
And then maybe it will be. Maybe.
No, but seriously, what is amending the Reserve Bank Act? How does that stop neoliberalism? I don't even know what that means.
I mean, you could Google it, right? It's like defined by the IMF. Like the IMF says, neoliberalism has probably gone a bit too far, and we should just chill out and remind ourselves that it's not just about fiscal policy and inflation. We need to pay attention to well-being and social stability. That's just the fucking IMF, though. What the fuck do they know?
So that's really cool and you know what it means. The problem is for 95% of people, it is used as a generic term of abuse for governments.
You could get the Reserve Bank to allow people to buy houses in New Zealand that are apartments and aren't quarter acres, and that is the future of that.
That's also not neoliberalism.
Yeah, but when our elected representatives profess to not know what neoliberalism is, I find that a little bit disturbing. Come on, you know what it means. You're just trying to play to the peanut gallery. Come on, man.
Although I do agree with Chris to the extent that it tends to be used so widely as a generalised term of abuse that it's hard to know what it means sometimes.
No, I don't think so.
My abuse is always very specific.
Hey, I like how we're getting controversial right at the end. Okay, and the last question I have in my hand, and I'll go to Chris Fowlie first with this, and it's something, I don't know, I thought I had the answer to this question in 1994, and the answer was 1995. But I was wrong. When will cannabis be legal in New Zealand?
How long is a joint? Well, certainly we have this pathway laid out for us, right? We have a referendum, so we could be looking at 3 years if it's binding. We could be looking at 5 years if it's not. We could be looking at a really long time, looking back to the 90s and that, if we muck this up. So this is where we're really cognizant of what you're saying. There are a lot of fish hooks in this. We've got to manage it properly. But we can pull this off. We can have it legal here in 3 years.
I think that might be us.
Hey, is Julia still here?
There's one more question. Can we do this again before we close? Absolutely, yes. The question was from Matthew, who runs the bar. Could we do this again before it closes? It closes in March. I'm pretty sure we can. Also, can me and Sandy Mill get another DJ gig before? Excellent. Okay.
Hey, is Julia still here? Is
Julia still here?
How much of a national treasure is Julia Deans?
Yeah.
Fucking awesome.
Woo! Right, and with that, thank you so much for coming. I love these events. I like the kind of way that everyone's just gathered around, and I'm so glad that the weather was because I was pretty fucking dark this morning. But yeah, thank you very much, and thank you especially to all our guests. It's fun doing this, and we will do it again. Cheers. Thank everyone, please.
Thank you.
And also thank Jogai, who you will hear much more of in future.
Thanks, Russell.
Oh, and also one more thing, and I probably shouldn't be saying this in Matthew's bar, but the well-known new disco and house DJ, Tall Black Guy, is actually playing right now down at Ponsonby Social Club, which is quite the after party. So cheers. It's free.